The quiet of the forest was deceptive to calm for what had just happened only hours earlier. Flashlights flickered between trees, casting long shadows against the brush. The rustle of boots on damp leaves was the only constant sound, apart from the low murmur of radios. Officer Daniel Reyes adjusted the strap of his vest and crouched near the edge of the dirt path. Beside him, his canine partner, Rex, stood alert, nose twitching, ears forward. The bond between them was unspoken, but strong. Reyes could read Rex like a book. And right now, something had caught the dog's attention. Earlier that evening, dispatch had received a call about a break-in at a high-end electronics store downtown. Witnesses described a single masked man, fast on his feet, carrying a duffel bag and disappearing into a black SUV. A short pursuit led the police to the outskirts of town, where the suspect fled on foot into the woods. The suspect had vanished into the dense brush like smoke. No footprints, no discarded evidence, nothing. Until Rex started tracking. Reyes gave a silent hand signal. Rex moved forward, nose low, weaving between trees. The other officers fanned out. It was dark, even with their lights. Thick clouds blocked any moonlight. There was something unnerving about how still everything had become. Then, without warning, Rex stopped. He sniffed the air once, let out a short bark, and took off to the left, deeper into the forest. Rex, come, Reyes called instinctively, but the dog didn't slow down. Where's he going? One of the officers asked. I don't know, Reyes replied, already moving to follow. Branches snapped underfoot. Liv slapped at Reyes's arms and face. He could still hear Rex, a faint rustling ahead, the occasional bark, but the sound was getting farther away. Then silence. Reyes stopped, heart pounding. He listened, nothing. Not even the chirp of crickets. Rex, he shouted. Rex, come back. The radio on his shoulder crackled. You got him, Reyes? No, he answered breathlessly. He ran off west of my position. I lost visual. Copy. We'll circle around, hold position. But Reyes didn't hold. Something felt off. Rex had never disobeyed a callback. Not like that. He kept moving. 10 more minutes passed. Reyes's voice was hoarse from calling. Other officers were reporting in no sign of the suspect. No sign of Rex. The trees grew denser, the ground steeper. This part of the woods hadn't been mapped for years. Finally, Reyes stopped. He was losing light, and the terrain was becoming dangerous. His fingers trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from fear. Rex wasn't just a partner. He was family. Trained, disciplined, brave, but still a living creature, vulnerable to injury. Then a sound cut through the night. A bark. It was faint, weak, but it was Rex. Reyes turned sharply and bolted in the direction of the sound. His boots slid in mud as he pushed through tangled roots and brush, his flashlight beam darting wildly across trees and stones. Another bark, closer now. Then something moved ahead, a shadow, dragging itself toward him. Rex. He breathed. The dog emerged from the brush, limping heavily. His left leg scraped raw. Blood matted his fur. His ears drooped, but his eyes were locked on Reyes. And between his teeth, hanging from his jaw, was a torn, mud-covered backpack. Reyes froze. You brought something back? He asked, voice trembling. Rex dropped the backpack at his feet, then sat down, panting hard. Reyes knelt and ran his hands gently over the dog's body. No deep wounds, but enough to show Rex had crawled or fought through something sharp. The backpack was old, torn at the seams. Zippers half open. He opened it carefully. Cash, IDs, a cheap phone with a cracked screen, and a sealed envelope tucked into an inner pocket. What is this? Reyes whispered. Before he could investigate further, his radio buzzed again. Reyes, do you copy? He pressed the call button. I found him. I've got Rex. And he brought something with him. It's not just a bag. It looks important. Copy that. Sending back up to your location now. Reyes looked down at Rex. The dog gave a short, proud huff. You clever, stubborn hero, he said softly. What did you just find? Little did he know the contents of that backpack would change everything. The woods were still as Officer Reyes knelt beside Rex, one hand resting gently on the dog's back. The backpack sat on the ground between them, its strange contents untouched except for that one glance, a burner phone, scattered cash, IDs, and that mysterious envelope. But there was no time to dig deeper now. Rex was hurt. More officers arrived. Within minutes, their flashlights cutting through the trees like beacons. One of them, Officer Tamsin, radioed for an emergency vet unit to be dispatched. Reyes stood, keeping his hand on Rex's fur, trying to hide the fear crawling up his spine. This mission had just taken a turn none of them saw coming. He tracked something, Reyes explained quickly. Ran off without hesitation, like he'd caught a strong scent. I called him, but he didn't stop. Then he went completely silent for nearly an hour. Tamsin crouched to examine the bag. And you're saying he came back with this? Dragging it, Reyes confirmed. Bleeding, limping. But he didn't stop until he reached me. The officers exchanged glances. The suspect they had been chasing had vanished into the trees. And now this bag appeared carried back by a wounded canine. There were no coincidences this deep in a case. Something inside that backpack was connected. Secure the bag, Tamsin ordered. Gloves on. Evidence protocol. Reyes didn't take his eyes off Rex. He could tell the dog was exhausted, his chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths, but he hadn't collapsed. He was holding on, like he knew the job wasn't quite done yet. I'm getting him out of here, Reyes said firmly. The vet team met them at the trailhead 30 minutes later. Rex was gently lifted onto a stretcher and loaded into the van. Reyes rode with him, in silence, hand resting on the stretcher the entire way. Back at the mobile command post, a forensic tech had already begun cataloging the contents of the backpack. The burner phone had no contacts, but its message log revealed something chilling: 3 recent voice messages, all from the same unknown number. The first message was short: change of drop, 9:30, same trail, marked by red cloth. The second: watch for patrols. Someone inside may have warned them. Use alternate ID if needed. The third was just one word: abort. The room fell quiet as the last message played. Someone warned them, Tamsin echoed, eyes narrowing. That means someone on our side. A leak. Reyes, still in uniform and refusing to sit, folded his arms across his chest. That's not just a robbery suspect. That's an operation. The fake IDs matched aliases from unsolved thefts in 3 different counties. A tech held up one of them. This one matches a security cam photo from a fraud case last month. Electronics store, hit at midnight. No fingerprints. Full sweep. The sealed envelope was next. Inside, a micro SD card, a small folded note with cryptic codes and dates, and a list of locations with times written in block letters. No names, no titles. But every location was near government buildings, airports, or secure facilities. The team stared at the list. What kind of robbery suspect carries this? Someone muttered. The micro SD card was loaded onto a laptop. What popped up stunned everyone. Surveillance footage. Meetings between unidentified individuals exchanging large sums of money. Papers being passed. One man in the video wore a jacket with a barely visible emblem. A private security firm contracted with federal officers. This is bigger than a burglary, Reyes said. This looks like planning. Possibly organized movement across cities. Tams leaned forward. And our suspect may not be a suspect at all. He could be a courier. Or a decoy. Reyes looked toward the field tent, where Rex was being treated. If Rex hadn't run off the trail and dragged that bag back, ... double quotes, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone knew what it meant. The case had shifted. What began as a robbery chase was now a web of hidden operations, secret messages, and suspicious timing. There were too many threads on. Rex had pulled the first one, and this was only the beginning. The emergency vet unit had done everything they could. Rex now lay on a padded table beneath a warming blanket, his left leg stitched and bandaged. His breathing had stabilized, but his eyes remained closed. Every so often, his ears twitched. At a familiar voice or distant soundproof, he was still listening. Still present. Officer Reyes stood by his side the entire time, arms crossed and jaw clenched. He hadn't spoken much since they arrived. When one of the medics suggested he take a break, Reyes shook his head and said quietly, "He didn't take a break when I needed him." Outside the tent, the forest had transformed into a scene of tightly controlled chaos. Yellow tape stretched across the entry path, and 2 mobile command trucks were parked at the edge of the clearing. A forensics van was processing the backpack, and its contents, now logged as priority evidence. But even with everything unfolding, everyone, officers, techs, analysts, kept asking the same question. How did Rex know to go off trail? What led him to that hidden bag in the first place? According to Reyes, Rex had never broken formation without cause. Never once in their years of service had the K9 chased a false lead. If he ran, Reyes told his commanding officer, it's because he knew something was there. Investigators returned to the spot where Rex had first disappeared. The terrain was unforgiving, dense shrubs, uneven ground, even patches of rusty barbed wire, partially buried in soil and covered in moss. The team found a narrow path marked with faint red cloth tied to a tree branch, exactly what the burner phone message had mentioned. Near that point, they also found faint footprints leading into a hollow beneath a thicket of roots. That's where they believed the backpack had been hidden, tucked away just enough to escape human sight, but not the nose of a trained dog. What made it even more impressive was the condition Rex had returned in. "I'm telling you," Reyes explained to the vet later that day. "He was hurt before he got the bag. His leg was bleeding already, which means he pushed through the injury just to get that thing back to us." The vet nodded. "That's rare. Dogs in pain will usually retreat or freeze up. But Rex, he went full mission mode. That kind of focus isn't taught. It's instinct." Back at the command center, officers began cross-referencing the locations listed on the envelope's folded note. One address matched a warehouse recently flagged for unusual activity by another department. Another was located less than a mile from a secured data center. The times listed next to each location created a timeline, a map of movement, or possibly planned deliveries. They weren't dealing with petty theft. They were unraveling a network. Meanwhile, news of Rex's actions was spreading within the department. Officers from neighboring precincts began calling in, asking if the rumors were true that a wounded dog had single-handedly uncovered evidence connecting to a much larger operation. Reyes didn't care about the buzz. He just wanted Rex to wake up. Late that evening, as the sky dimmed and floodlights illuminated the camp, a soft sound came from inside the vet tent. A quiet whine. Reyes rushed in, heart skipping. Rex had lifted his head slightly, eyes half open, tail twitching once against the blanket. "There you are," Reyes said, kneeling beside him. "You stubborn beast." Rex blinked slowly, then gave a soft huff, more air than bark, but it was enough. Reyes scratched behind his ear. "Careful not to touch the injured leg. You came back when you didn't have to," he whispered. "You found something no one else could. And you didn't stop, even when it hurt." Outside the tent, a young officer ran up to the command unit, holding a printed still frame from the surveillance video found on the memory card. "You're going to want to see this," he said, breathless. The image was clear. One of the men in the video was wearing a badge barely visible, but they're not criminals, a government employees. The shock traveled fast. Inside the tent, Rex drifted back to sleep, unaware that his mission had just uncovered a traitor, hiding in plain sight. Back at the mobile command unit, the air had turned sharp with tension. Officers gathered around the small monitor, where the still image had been pulled from the micro SD card. The man in the video, mid-40s, clean-cut, wearing a plain dark jacket, stood with his back mostly turned. But on the zoomed-in frame, just above his beltline, a small clipped badge was visible. The insignia wasn't from a criminal organization. It belonged to a government agency. "This is bigger than a burglary," Captain Monroe said, rubbing the back of his neck. "This is coordination. Someone inside an official department is either working with them or leading them." Reyes leaned forward, arms resting on the table. That backpack wasn't abandoned, it was stashed. Rex must have caught the scent when the guy passed through that clearing. Maybe he panicked. Maybe he meant to come back for it. But my dog found it first. The techs had finished cataloging every item in the backpack. The burner phone was traced to a prepaid terminal, purchased in cash from a station 2 towns away. All the messages on the device were encrypted. But basic software had already extracted short audio recordings, proof of communication with multiple voices. The IDs were fake, but expertly done. Each carried a photo of the same man, paired with different names and birth. One ID had a barcode linked to a university's security system, while another matched the visual format of an interstate delivery company's employee badge. But it was the memory card that continued to give up its secrets. The surveillance footage stored on it revealed different scenes, grainy angles from what appeared to be hotel lobbies, alleyways, and low-lit offices. Meetings without context. Transactions without faces. One video, only 15 seconds long, showed a white van being loaded with identical black duffel bags by 2 individuals wearing tactical gloves and masks. Behind them, a third man gave instructions. It was the same man with the badge. "This is a courier ring," Tamsin said, reading from her notes. "They're passing off bags, rerouting items, disguising IDs, and they've got someone covering their tracks from the inside." Reyes said nothing. His mind was still with Rex, who now lay resting inside a recovery crate a few feet away. Every so often, his tail would tap lightly against the side, just enough to remind Reyes he was still listening. Captain Monroe turned back to the team. So this wasn't a simple robbery gone wrong. They suspect we thought he was acting alone, but this proves he was part of something layered, planned, possibly funded. One of the forensic analysts, a younger officer named Grayson, stepped forward holding a pair of latex gloves and a small notepad. I reviewed the contents of the sealed envelope again. He said, "There's a pattern to the addresses. Every location corresponds with either a restricted access government zone, a data exchange facility, or a storage unit registered under a shell company." He laid down the folded paper. "We think these were pickup points." Monroe studied the paper. "Pickup for what?" "That's what we don't know yet," Grayson replied. "Could be data. Could be physical items. We've sent it all to higher agencies for matching, but here's what's clear. X didn't just find evidence. He found proof of a network. One we never saw coming." Reyes exhaled, stepping back from the table, and it almost went unnoticed. If Rex hadn't broken protocol, if he hadn't followed his instincts instead of my command. Monroe cut in, voice firm. "He made the right call." There was a pause. Then Reyes added, "He always does." Outside, rain began to patter lightly on the metal roof of the mobile unit. It had been nearly 24 hours since the initial chase through the woods. What started as a robbery pursuit had transformed into an intelligence operation. But questions still hung heavy in the air. Who was the man in the video? What was in those duffel bags? And how many others were involved? Back in the recovery tent, Rex's eyes fluttered open. His ears twitched. Reyes walked over and knelt beside the crate. "You did good, partner," he whispered. "You didn't just bring back a backpack. You brought back a case no one knew existed." Rex let out a soft, proud sigh. And for the first time since the chase began, Reyes allowed himself to believe this dog hadn't just changed the mission. He'd changed everything. The following morning, the investigation shifted into high gear. The mobile command post now resembled a federal-level war room. Satellite maps covered every table. Evidence boards lined the walls, pinned with photographs of the suspect, the video stills, and the now infamous backpack. Every lead uncovered over the last 24 hours had pointed to one clear truth. Rex had found something he wasn't supposed to, and that changed everything. A federal liaison had arrived on site before sunrise. Agent Lena Caldwell, sharp-eyed and unflinching, stepped into the case with quiet authority. After a quick briefing with Captain Monroe and Officer Reyes, she reviewed the footage from the memory card in silence. When the clip of the badge man giving instructions finished, she turned toward the team. "This is not just a courier ring," she said. "This is an intel funnel. What you found is likely part of a broader scheme. We've seen similar activity in other districts, but nothing this precise, nothing this close." Reyes leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "And the backpack? Just one piece?" Caldwell nodded. "A piece they were very careful to hide. Which means, the moment it went missing, they knew." In a corner of the room, a forensic analyst was finishing a sweep of the backpack's seams. "We missed this," she said, raising a small evidence bag inside it, a micro-tracker the size of a shirt button. "They were tracking their own gear," Tamsin said. The analyst nodded, either to recover it quickly or make sure it wasn't compromised. But it had been compromised by a four-legged officer who refused to stop, even after injury. What struck everyone the most was the fact that none of this was meant to be found. The suspect hadn't just lost the backpack. He had hidden it, wedged into an overgrown root system, likely marked by the red cloth as part of a silent signal. Had Rex not veered off, it would still be buried in the woods. Back at the field tent, Reyes checked in on Rex. The dog had eaten a small meal and lifted his head when Reyes entered. Despite the fatigue in his eyes, there was a sharpness there, sense of pride, a quiet awareness that he had done something important. "You're causing a lot of paperwork, buddy," Reyes said, kneeling beside him. Rex blinked once. Reyes chuckled. "But I guess you earned it." Outside, Monroe approached, his face tight with new information. "We got another ID hit. One of the fake identities matches a background check from a private contractor, someone who applied to a defense communications firm 6 months ago. They never followed through. Too many red flags." Reyes narrowed his eyes. "So we're talking cyber theft now?" "Possibly," Monroe said. "This group might not just be moving things. They could be targeting data. And that's where the courier fits in," Reyes added. "Moving physical devices, drives, cards, memory chips, stuff that can't be traced digitally. Caldwell returned with more intel. 2 of the addresses on the list match with prior field cases tied to document leaks. One was near a data storage unit recently burglarized. The other was across the street from a secure printing facility. We're connecting the dots now, but the patterns are real. And Rex had found the thread that started it all. Later that afternoon, the suspect's path was confirmed. Thermal drone footage from a nearby wildlife agency, reviewed as a long shot, captured a blurry figure cutting through the woods at the exact moment Rex had disappeared from the main search. Just minutes later, the suspect vanished behind the spot where Rex would eventually locate the bag. That sealed it. The man had stashed the backpack and continued fleeing, assuming no one would find it. But he didn't count on Rex. By evening, federal teams were preparing a broader sting operation. They now had names, timestamps, and several facilities on alert. The investigation had gone from local robbery to national threat in under 48 hours. And at the center of it all was one K-9 officer recovering quietly in his crate, unaware of just how much his instincts had uncovered. Reyes sat beside him, tired but steady. "You picked the one clue they thought they hid best," he whispered. "You turned this whole thing on its head." Rex gave a small, satisfied sigh. And outside the tent, a quiet storm began to build, one that would ripple far beyond those woods. 2 days after the operation began, the case no longer resembled the original call that came over the police radio. What had started as a local robbery pursuit was now a cross-agency operation with federal involvement. Surveillance teams, encrypted data, and tactical briefings. And through it all, one unlikely hero sat quietly inside a climate-controlled tent, chewing slowly on his recovery safe toy, completely unaware that his instincts had cracked open something massive. Rex, the injured K-9 officer, had become more than a partner to Officer Daniel Reyes. In the span of just 48 hours, he had turned into a symbol of the department's finest qualities, courage, and intuition. Word had spread far beyond the local precinct. News stations had started calling. There were requests for interviews, feature stories, and even a few offers from national outlets. Reyes politely declined them all. "We're not done yet," he told his captain. "Let's finish the job first." The investigation had accelerated. The burner phone's data, once thought to be unrecoverable, was being decrypted using federal software. One voicemail in particular stood out: background noise, the clinking of glass, a voice saying, "Courier drop confirmed." Next one marked KDR7. That final code, KDR7, matched the initial scrawled on the envelope found inside the backpack. After cross-referencing with Intel databases, the team discovered a cold lead from 6 months earlier. KDR7 was once flagged in connection to a network of untraceable drives suspected to contain stolen government files. The case had stalled. No suspects identified. Until now. Agent Caldwell, who had taken point on the interagency bridge, turned to Reyes and said, "Your dog may have just cracked open KDR7 without even knowing it." Reyes glanced at Rex's crate. He always knew. He just doesn't care about recognition. While tech teams worked, analysts mapped out the courier's intended route based on the address list found in the envelope. They discovered a disturbing pattern. The addresses were positioned in a sequence that could allow one person to pass undetected between locations. Each site tied to different arms of government, data, or intelligence contractors. Most of the facilities had minor security and weren't known targets. That was the brilliance of it. No one had looked closely. No guns, no explosives, no alarms. Caldwell noted. They weren't trying to cause damage. They were trying to move information quietly and consistently. And Rex had found the weak link in their chain. One analyst placed a red pin into a corkboard filled with strings and photographs. "Here," she said, tapping on a location 2 towns over. This site's timestamp was listed for tomorrow morning. Captain Monroe turned to Caldwell. "Think he'll show up?" "If he does," she replied, "we'll be ready." They set up surveillance. Immediately, federal and local agents worked side by side. Unmarked vehicles parked nearby. Entry and exit points were covered. Snipers were positioned discreetly on rooftops. All waited for a suspect, who had no idea a wounded K-9 had undone everything. Reyes stayed behind with Rex, though his every instinct screamed to be out in the field. But he knew his place was here beside the partner, who had done more than anyone had expected. That evening, Reyes sat by Rex's side, slowly brushing his fur, as the dog laid calmly on a blanket. "You didn't follow the rules," he said with a half smile. "You didn't wait for a command. And you know what? I'm glad. Rex wagged his tail once, just enough to make his point. You trusted your nose. Your gut. And it led to something we never could have predicted. Just then, a knock at the tent's side flap. Officer Tamsin stepped in, breathless but smiling. They got him. Reyes stood quickly. The courier, yeah, walked right into the trap. Same jacket, same build. He had another drive on him, encrypted. Just like the last one. Reyes let out a breath, not of relief, but satisfaction. Rex's ears perked up as if he understood. You did it, Reyes said softly, crouching beside him. You really did it. Outside the tent, the investigation continued. There were still questions to answer, people to arrest, and files to decrypt, but the domino had fallen. And it all started with a bleeding dog who dragged a muddy backpack out of the woods because something inside told him it mattered, and it did. What came next didn't feel like victory, it felt like a storm. Within 48 hours of the raids, headlines across the country had exploded with the story of the injured K9 that cracked open a multi-state crime ring. Phrases like hero dog disrupts, criminal network, and K9 uncovers evidence no one knew existed flooded every major news outlet. But behind the scenes, things were far more complicated. The courier ring was bigger than anyone first assumed. It wasn't just about fraud or stolen data, it was about logistics. Transporting highly sensitive materials between locations with the perfect cover, unremarkable people using fake IDs, meeting in blind spots, never drawing attention. The backpack Rex found was never supposed to resurface. Now that it had, panic had rippled through the entire operation. Some suspects went silent. Others ran. A few tried to erase digital footprints before task forces caught up. But it was too late. The memory card had exposed too much. Names, timestamps, footage, it was all there. And law enforcement wasn't letting it go. Inside the temporary command post, the pressure was mounting. Agents worked around the clock, linking new names to old aliases, matching locations to previous tip-offs. Every time a lead checked out, it traced back to one thing. The moment Rex returned from the woods, Agent Caldwell addressed the assembled team. During an early morning briefing, we believe the courier system was used not just for internal theft, but for trafficking of encrypted information. Some of it might be international. We're handing over partial jurisdiction to the Cyber Division and Homeland Security. A silence followed. Reyes sat at the back of the room, exhausted but steady. He hadn't left Rex's side for more than an hour since the operation began. The dog was healing, his energy returning slowly but visibly. The limp remained, but the fire in his eyes had never gone out. After the meeting, Caldwell pulled Reyes aside. You do know your K9 shifted the course of this investigation, right? She said. Reyes offered a tired smile. He just did what he always does. Found what others miss. She nodded. Still, a lot of people owe your partner more than they'll ever admit. But not everyone was pleased with the spotlight. Behind the success of the operation was a haunting truth. The presence of a leak. One of the individuals caught in the footage had been tentatively identified as a low-level contractor, someone with access to communications, schedules, and delivery manifests. His name had never appeared in any red flag database. No criminal history, no suspicious affiliations, just quiet access. He's the first, Monroe said during a private debrief. There may be others, maybe even higher. That knowledge sent a chill through the department. Trust was suddenly fragile. And while Rex's actions had opened a door to truth, they'd also opened the door to fear. But in the midst of all the uncertainty, one thing brought everyone together. 3 days after the incident, the department held a private ceremony. No media, no fanfare, just the team, gathered in a clearing near the station, where Rex was presented with a medal for bravery and exceptional service. Reyes knelt beside him, adjusting the ribbon around his partner's neck. Rex sat calmly, tail sweeping the grass behind him. You earned this, Reyes whispered. And then some. Captain Monroe addressed the small crowd. Sometimes breakthroughs come from years of work, he said. Sometimes they come from one moment. One decision. In this case, one dog who refused to give up. Applause followed, but it wasn't loud. It was respectful. Sincere. Rex looked up at Reyes and gave a single soft bark, like he understood. That night, as the stars began to rise and the last of the agents packed up their temporary base, Reyes sat with Rex just outside the tent. We're not done, he said, stroking Rex's fur. But you started something. You changed the direction of this case. Of everything. Rex laid his head on Reyes's boot, finally relaxing, finally at peace. And somewhere, even as arrests continued and investigations widened. The storm Rex had started was still unfolding quietly, powerfully, reshaping everything it touched. 2 weeks had passed since Rex limped out of the woods, dragging the backpack that would change everything. What began as a search for a burglary suspect had evolved into a sweeping investigation spanning multiple states, involving federal intelligence agencies, cybersecurity experts, and special task forces. But the story that stuck, the one people whispered in briefing rooms and printed in bold headlines, wasn't about encrypted drives or digital HEISTS. It was about a dog. Rex's recovery had been steady. His stitches were healing, his energy returning day by day. By now, he had been cleared for light walking and supervised movement. Reyes never left his side for long. He walked Rex through the department courtyard each morning, where officers would stop, kneel, and greet the hero who had become a living legend. The department had received hundreds of emails from civilians, thanking the K9 for his service. Children sent hand-drawn pictures. One family from 3 towns over even donated brand new protective vests for the entire K9 unit. Rex had become more than a working dog. He had become a symbol of what it meant to serve with instinct, courage, and heart. The case itself had expanded far beyond their precinct. Homeland Security had taken the lead, and several suspects were already in custody. Every piece of evidence from that backpack had proved valid. The courier was being interrogated at a federal site. The badge-wearing man from the video had been identified, arrested, and charged with leaking classified schedules to criminal intermediaries. Several other facilities across the country were now under increased protection. But no matter how far the investigation spread, everyone knew it had started with one act: a wounded K9 who didn't stop. Reyes sat at his desk, reviewing a report, when a quiet knock came at the door. It was Captain Monroe. "We've got something for you too," Monroe said. He motioned toward Rex, who was resting nearby. Reyes stood slowly. "More tests." Monroe grinned. "No. Recognition." Downstairs, the department had gathered once again, this time in full dress. A special plaque was unveiled on the wall, etched in polished steel and mounted on wood. At the top, K9 Rex Service, above self. Below it, a description of his role in the operation that had helped stop one of the most carefully hidden courier networks in recent history. Reyes stood beside his partner as applause filled the hall. Rex sat tall, calm, but alert, his perked, head high. He wore a custom medal attached to his collar. For once, even he seemed to sense the moment's weight. Monroe addressed the room. "I've worked in law enforcement for over 25 years, he said, "and I've seen officers do incredible things. But rarely do we witness pure instinct make the difference between closing a case and opening a national investigation." He turned to Rex. "This dog didn't follow an order. He followed something deeper, and in doing so, he gave us more than a clue. He gave us a second chance to stop something much bigger than we imagined." When the ceremony ended, Reyes knelt beside Rex and gently scratched behind his ears. "We started that night chasing shadows," he said softly, "and you brought us the light." Later that day, Reyes and Rex returned home. No sirens, no reports, just peace out in the backyard. Rex slowly lay on the grass, sun warming his fur. His eyes watched the breeze rustle the leaves. Reyes sat beside him, grateful for the quiet. "We'll probably be called again," he said with a sigh. "More missions, more long nights." Rex wagged his tail once in reply. "But for now," Reyes added, "you rest. You've earned it." And as the afternoon stretched into a golden evening, one thing was clear: Rex would always be more than a partner. He was the dog who trusted his instincts over commands, who pushed through pain to deliver truth, and who reminded everyone that sometimes the heroes we need walk on 4 legs and never ask for credit. Rex had done his duty, and in doing so, he became a legend.